On my 24th birthday, my dad texted me, "We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful." That was the moment I realized my own family had robbed me. That car wasn't a luxury. It was mine. Paid for with 2 years of double shifts, sleepless nights, and every dollar I scraped together as a nurse. Before I could even catch my breath, another message came in, this time demanding $6,000 for my brother's college tuition. In that single moment, I understood something I had been avoiding my whole life. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their pride. To them, I was just an ATM. And that night, I made a choice that would change everything. When I tell you that my car meant everything to me, I'm not exaggerating. It wasn't just four wheels and an engine. It was proof that I could stand on my own in a house where independence was never allowed. I grew up in the Parker family, where my father, Richard, made every rule and my mother, Elaine, backed him no matter how unfair. My younger brother, Brandon, was the golden child, the one who got sneakers worth hundreds of dollars while I was told to make do with whatever I could afford from the discount rack. By the time I was 16, I was working every weekend, babysitting, bagging groceries, running food at a diner. Anything that would put a few extra dollars in my pocket. I wasn't saving for makeup or nights out like my friends. I was saving for freedom. I wanted a car that belonged to me, with no strings attached, no father's name on the paperwork, no one who could dangle it over my head like a favor I had to repay. At 18, when most of my classmates were dreaming about prom, I was writing checks. My dad called it responsibility training. $400 a month, plus groceries and bills, all handed over just to keep a roof over my head in the house where I grew up. That's when I learned something harsh. Love in my family came with a price tag. Every smile, every scrap of approval was tied to money. Still, I kept saving. 2 years of shifts that bled into one another. There were nights I came home so exhausted that I couldn't remember if I had eaten. My feet ached, my hands cracked from sanitizer at the hospital, and sometimes my eyes burned so badly that I fell asleep with my textbook still open. But every dollar I tucked away pushed me closer to a dream no one could steal. When I finally had enough, I walked into that used car lot with a folder full of research and a determination my father could never break. I had studied reliability ratings, calculated interest rates, and knew the market value down to the penny. I picked a Toyota Corolla, silver, nothing fancy, but reliable enough to carry me through double shifts and late-night drives home. Signing those papers felt like claiming a piece of myself. The dealer handed me the keys, and I swear they weighed less than an ounce, but felt heavier than any crown. Driving it home for the first time, windows down, radio low, I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't just driving a car. I was driving away from the idea that my life had to be dictated by Richard Parker's rules. That Corolla was freedom. But when I pulled into the driveway, proud and trembling, my father only scoffed. "Could have gotten you a better deal if you'd asked me," he muttered, not even looking up from his recliner. My mother echoed him with a small smile, like his word was gospel. Brandon laughed, tossing his football from hand to hand, already asking if he could borrow it for his date on Friday. In that moment, the joy in my chest cracked just a little. They couldn't stand to see me achieve something on my own. That's when I began noticing the patterns more clearly. Whenever I gained something, my family found a way to chip at it. A scholarship? My dad said it belonged to the family because they had given me a home. My grandmother's necklace? It suddenly looked better on my mother's neck at a family dinner. And when I questioned it, she smiled and said, "Family shares." Looking back now, I can see how every little theft prepared me for the bigger one. My car wasn't just transportation. It was the first thing I bought that they couldn't claim credit for. Which is exactly why, deep down, I think my father hated it. Because when I slid behind that wheel, I wasn't under his thumb. And if there's one thing Richard Parker couldn't stand, it was losing control. That car was my declaration of independence. And losing it, especially on my birthday, wasn't just a theft. It was war. Growing up in the Parker household meant living under one law, my father's. Richard Parker was the kind of man who believed authority was the same as love, He barked orders from his recliner, doled out punishments for the smallest defiance, and called it raising you right. My mother, Elaine, wasn't cruel in the same way. She didn't yell, didn't slam her fists on the table. No, she weaponized silence, guilt, and soft smiles that made you feel like you were wrong for even questioning the rules. And Brandon, my younger brother, lived like a prince in the middle of it all. When I was 18, I thought adulthood meant freedom. Instead, it meant rent. $400 a month every month handed straight into my father's palm. I was still in high school, working nights and weekends, and while my classmates complained about curfews, I was handing over paychecks just to sleep under the same roof I'd grown up in. My dad called it teaching responsibility. But let's be honest, it was exploitation, plain and simple. Meanwhile, Brandon never once pulled out his wallet. His allowance came in folded 20s dropped casually on his desk. New sneakers arrived in boxes stacked against his wall. My parents paid for his sports trips, his prom suit, even his first car when he turned 16. A shiny Ford Mustang with a bow on top. I remember standing in the driveway that day, watching my father beam with pride as Brandon revved the engine. My dad had never once looked at me like that, not even when I earned my nursing license. The double standard was impossible to ignore. If Brandon spilled juice on the carpet, my mom laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." If I left a plate in the sink, I was lazy and ungrateful. If Brandon needed money, it appeared. If I asked for help with books for my nursing prerequisites, I was told to get another job. But it wasn't just the money. It was the constant reminder that nothing in that house belonged to me. When my grandmother passed away, she left me a pearl necklace I had adored since childhood. A month later, I saw it gleaming around my mother's neck at a family gathering. When I asked, she smiled and said, "Family shares." That phrase became a weapon, a way to strip me of anything that gave me joy. And then there was the paperwork. One morning, rushing out the door to a double shift, my dad shoved a folder into my hands. "Sign this real quick. Just registration renewal," he said. Half asleep, already late, I scribbled my name without thinking. Months later, I would find out he'd added himself to my car title. At the time, I didn't realize what it meant. I just remember the smug look on his face when he tucked the papers away. That was the Parker household. Control dressed up as care, theft disguised as family duty. On the surface, we looked like a normal middle-class family. We ate dinners together, went to church on Sundays, posed for holiday pictures. But under that shiny veneer was a constant imbalance. Brandon lifted up like a king while I was bled dry. Dollar by dollar, ounce by ounce of dignity. I used to lie awake at night, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, wondering if maybe I was the problem. My father always said I was too sensitive, that I didn't understand the sacrifices parents make. My mother said I should be grateful for a roof and meals. And Brandon? He didn't care. He was too busy enjoying the fruits of their favoritism to see the weight crushing me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't me. It was the system of power my father built. A hierarchy where my role was clear. Provider, scapegoat, servant. That's why my car was so important. It was the one thing I had clawed into existence outside of his reach. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I realize the signs were everywhere. The constant digs at my independence. The way my father tightened control anytime I showed the slightest hint of self-sufficiency. And the look in his eyes whenever I held those car keys, as if freedom itself was an insult. In a house like that, birthdays didn't matter. Achievements didn't matter. What mattered was obedience. And soon I was about to learn just how far my father would go to remind me that, in his eyes, I would never truly own anything. The morning of my 24th birthday felt like any other day in the Parker household. Silent, cold, and transactional. No card on the table. No happy birthday waiting in the kitchen. My mom hummed as she poured Brandon orange juice, but she didn't look at me. My dad grunted from behind his newspaper. Brandon scrolled on his phone and muttered something about needing new cleats for the season. Not a single word about my birthday. I told myself it didn't matter. Birthdays had always been a hollow thing in my house. Growing up, Brandon got balloons, cakes, even surprise parties with friends. Mine? Maybe a store-bought cupcake if my grandmother remembered. And now she was gone. So even that small piece of kindness had vanished. So I put on my scrubs, tied my hair back, and told myself I didn't need their recognition. My worth wasn't measured in candles or cards. I had patients who needed me, colleagues who saw me. At the hospital, at least, I mattered. That morning, the pediatric ward was chaos in motion. 2 new admissions before 9, a nervous first-time mother asking 100 questions, and a charting system that seemed to multiply paperwork every time I blinked. But I loved it. I loved the rhythm of moving from room to room, the sense of purpose that came from soothing a crying child or calming panicked parents. Around noon, Amelia appeared at the nurse's station with a cupcake. A single candle flickered and she whispered, "Make a wish." She knew I hated being the center of attention, so she kept it quiet. That tiny gesture nearly broke me. One cupcake meant more than anything I'd gotten from my family in years. I smiled, promised to join her and a few friends for dinner after my shift, and went back to work feeling lighter. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I could salvage the day. Maybe it wouldn't sting so badly this year. Then my phone buzzed. I thought it might be an aunt or cousin sending a text. Maybe someone remembered. I pulled it out of my pocket during a rare quiet moment, expecting a happy birthday. Instead, it was from my father. "We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here." The words burned into me, so sharp I had to reread them. My car. The Corolla I worked 2 years to buy. The one I'd paid for, every mile, every repair, every tank of gas. Sold. Without my permission. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been punched out of me. I stumbled into the supply closet just to breathe. Then another message came. "Oh, and Brandon's starting college next month. You'll cover his first semester? $6,000 due this week." I swear I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. They had stolen from me and in the same breath demanded more. Like I was nothing but a credit card with a pulse. The rage rose first, hot and blinding. Then the grief came, cold and suffocating. Because in that moment, I understood the truth I had been running from for years. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their pride. I was their ATM. I tried calling my dad, straight to voicemail. I called my mom, and after the 4th ring, she answered, voice falsely cheerful. I could hear Brandon laughing in the background. "Your father handled all that," she said when I demanded an explanation. "We needed the money for family expenses, and since you live here for practically nothing, it seemed fair. Plus, you can take the bus to work. Lots of people do." My voice cracked. "That's theft, Mom. The title's in my name." She sighed. "Don't be dramatic. Your father added his name months ago when he took it in for inspection. You signed the paperwork, remember?" And in a flash, I remembered the morning he shoved documents into my hands, rushing me to sign before a double shift. "Just registration renewal," he'd said. My stomach twisted. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Standing in that supply closet, staring at the gray walls, I felt the weight of years pressing down. The rent payments since high school, the stolen scholarship, my grandmother's necklace on my mother's neck. And now, the one symbol of freedom I had left ripped away. I slid down the wall and whispered to myself, "Enough." That was the moment everything shifted. That was the moment I stopped trying to win their approval. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing pieces of myself just to be allowed a seat at their table. On my 24th birthday, with latex gloves still in my pocket and a half-eaten cupcake on the desk outside, I decided I wasn't going to be their daughter anymore. I was going to be my own protector. And what came after that decision would change everything. By the time my shift ended, I was running on fumes. 12 hours in pediatrics will drain anyone, but the weight sitting on my chest wasn't from patience or paperwork. It was from those texts. My car, sold, my savings, demanded. I took the bus home, a ride that stretched 45 minutes and felt like a lifetime. Each stop gave me more time to rehearse what I wanted to say. though the words kept tangling in my throat. I wasn't going to stay silent this time. I couldn't. When I walked through the front door, the smell of pot roast hit me like a wall. My mother's specialty. She only made it on holidays or when she knew something ugly was coming and wanted to smooth it over with comfort food. The table was set with the good dishes, the ones usually reserved for Christmas. Another warning sign. There she is. My father's voice boomed from the recliner, eyes glued to the television. He didn't bother standing up, didn't even glance at me until I set my bag down. Birthday girl, finally home. Dinner's almost ready. I forced my voice to stay steady. Where's my car? He muted the TV, leaned back in his chair, and smiled like this was nothing. Sold it this morning. Guy gave us cash. He finally turned his head, meeting my eyes with a look that wasn't apologetic, wasn't even defensive. It was challenging, as if daring me to push back. Good timing, too, with Brandon's tuition coming due. The room tilted for a second, my pulse spiking so fast I thought I might faint. He said it like he'd sold a lawnmower. Like my car, my independence, the one thing I owned outright, was just some tool he had the right to pawn off whenever he wanted. You had no right, I managed, my voice shaking but low. My mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her tone falsely sweet. Let's not start the evening with arguments, Hailey. It's your birthday. I made your favorite dessert. Chocolate cake, as if frosting could plaster over theft. Before I could respond, footsteps pounded down the stairs. Brandon bounded into the room, grinning, his hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, even though it was nearly 8 o'clock. He punched my arm lightly. Hey, tuition fairy, Dad says you're covering my first semester. Perfect timing. I just ordered my new laptop for school. The casual entitlement in his voice, the absolute lack of awareness, made something inside me snap. I looked at him, at my brother who'd never worked a day in his life, who had never handed over a paycheck just to keep a roof above his head, who had been handed cars and cash and clothes while I was nickel and dimed into exhaustion. And now he was laughing, calling me a fairy like I was some magical ATM designed to fund his dreams. My father chuckled, watching the exchange with satisfaction, as if this was exactly how the world should work. My mother smiled tightly and set the pot roast on the table. Come on, everyone, let's sit down like a proper family. I pulled out a chair slowly, my hands trembling under the table. I wasn't ready to unleash everything yet, not until I could find the right words. But inside, a fire was building. They thought this dinner was going to be like all the others. They thought I'd swallow my anger, force a smile, and play my part. But this wasn't going to be another night of silence. Because in that moment, listening to my father's smug tone, watching my mother hide behind dessert, and hearing Brandon gloat over a laptop I was apparently supposed to pay for, I knew something with absolute clarity. This was not a family dinner. This was a stick-up, and I was done being their victim. The clink of dishes filled the silence as we sat around the table. The good china gleamed under the chandelier, and for a second I thought about how absurd it was. We only used these plates when my mother wanted to prove something. To neighbors, to relatives, or apparently to me. Hailey Parker, my mother, was a master at disguising cruelty with kindness. Where my father barked, she coaxed. Where he demanded, she suggested. And where he struck with blunt force, she slipped the knife in with a smile. She ladled pot roast onto my plate, her voice soft, almost melodic. Eat up, sweetheart. You've worked such a long day. This will make you feel better. I looked down at the meat, steam rising, the smell rich and heavy. Once, maybe years ago, this gesture would have comforted me. Tonight, it felt like bait. I don't want pot roast, I said quietly. Her smile didn't falter. Nonsense, you always loved it as a child. You'll feel better once you eat. Food brings us together. Brandon snickered, shoveling mashed potatoes onto his plate like nothing in the world was wrong. My father carved into the roast, acting as though the theft of my car was a mere detail, an errand already forgotten. My mother leaned closer, her tone dropping to that tender whisper she reserved for moments when she wanted me pliant. Hailey, honey, Let's not ruin tonight. It's your birthday. We're all together. Can't you just enjoy one meal without turning it into a fight? My throat tightened. There it was. That toxic twist. She wasn't acknowledging the betrayal, the theft, the demand for $6,000. She was framing me as the problem for reacting to it. I set my fork down. You sold my car without my permission. That's not a meal conversation. It's theft. Her eyes softened in faux sorrow, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Her skin was warm, deceptively gentle. Sweetheart, we didn't do it to hurt you. Families share. That money went to help with expenses, to make sure Brandon has a chance to succeed. Isn't that what family does? Lift each other up? I jerked my hand back. Funny. Family never lifted me up. I paid rent since I was a teenager. I paid for nursing school. I bought my car with my own money. When has anyone here lifted me? For a flicker of a second, her smile cracked, but then it reappeared, wider than before, like a mask tightening. We gave you a home. We gave you food. Your father worked so hard to provide. And Brandon's future is all of our responsibility. You wouldn't want him to struggle, would you? There it was again. Guilt, wrapped in sugar. She didn't ask. She didn't beg. She painted me as selfish if I dared to say no. Across the table, Brandon chimed in between bites. Yeah, Hailey. Don't be selfish. You're the one with a real job. $6,000's nothing for you. My chest burned. Nothing? $6,000 was months of savings, emergency funds I'd scraped together shift by shift. And they treated it like pocket change. I turned back to my mother, my voice sharper. You say family shares, but it's never equal, is it? Brandon gets cars, tuition, freedom. I get bills, rent, and now threats. Her smile faltered again. She set her fork down, folding her hands neatly as if she were about to pray. You're being dramatic. We're asking for help, not threats. And the car, your father's name was on the paperwork too. Legally, it was his as much as yours. I felt the blood drain from my face. There it was, the hidden knife. The moment I'd signed those papers months ago, the registration renewal, they had turned my independence into a shared asset. My father had planned this. My mother had watched. And now they were both pretending it was natural, reasonable, even fair. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to sit rigidly, my voice low but steady. You tricked me, both of you. You let me believe I owned something just so you could take it away when it suited you. Her eyes glistened with practiced tears. Hailey, please, don't say things you'll regret. You'll break your father's heart. That line. It had followed me since childhood. Every time I asked for fairness, every time I pushed back, my mother pulled out the same card. Don't upset your father. It was less about his heart and more about protecting his control. I studied her face, the way her lashes fluttered, the way her lips trembled just enough to look fragile. I realized she wasn't the victim she played. She was an accomplice. And as she sat there, serving dessert with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, I felt something inside me shift. I no longer saw her as my mother. I saw her as part of the machine designed to keep me in my place. Brandon leaned back in his chair, chewing loudly, the way he always did when he knew it annoyed me. He wiped his mouth on his sleeve, despite the napkin sitting right in front of him, and grinned like this entire night was entertainment. So, he said between bites, Dad says you're covering my first semester. Awesome, right? Perfect timing, too. I just ordered a new laptop. Top of the line. It's going to be sick. I froze, fork suspended in the air. My brother wasn't thanking me. He wasn't asking if I could help. He was announcing it like a done deal, like I had signed the check already and the money was his. I set my fork down slowly. Excuse me? He smirked. Come on, Hailey. You've got a real job now. You're the nurse in the family, saving lives, making steady money. $6,000's nothing for you. And it's not like you have kids or a husband to support. You're basically free cash flow. The words hit me harder than any insult my father had ever thrown. Free cash flow. That's what I was to him. Not a sister, not a human being with her own goals, her own bills, her own life. Just an ATM with scrubs on. I clenched my hands under the table to keep from shaking. Brandon, do you even hear yourself? That's my money. Money I worked for. Money I need to live. He laughed, a light, careless chuckle that made my skin crawl. You're so dramatic. It's college, Hailey. My future. And let's be real. You're not exactly hurting. You bought a car, didn't you? Oh, wait. He smirked wider, eyes glinting. Guess you don't have that anymore, do you? The blood in my veins turned molten. He was mocking me. My brother, the boy I'd once babysat, the boy I used to share snacks with when mom wasn't looking, was laughing at the fact that my parents had stolen from me. And not only laughing, he was benefiting, celebrating. You think this is funny? I whispered, my voice so low it silenced even my mother's practiced smile. Brandon shrugged. Not funny, just fair. You got your nursing degree. You're stable. It's my turn to be supported. That's how families work. I snapped my head toward my father. Did you tell him that? That I'm responsible for his tuition? Richard didn't even look up from carving his roast. Of course I did. Family comes first. Brandon deserves a chance to succeed, and you're in the best position to help. That's how this works. Everyone contributes. Everyone? My voice rose, trembling with rage. I've been contributing since I was a teenager. I paid rent. I paid utilities. I bought groceries. What did Brandon ever contribute? Brandon rolled his eyes. Don't be jealous just because Dad and Mom believe in me. Not my fault you're bitter. Jealous. That word cracked something inside me. How many times had it been used against me? Every time I pointed out the favoritism, every time I asked why Brandon got away with everything, I was accused of jealousy. But it wasn't jealousy. It was justice. I slammed my hand on the table. You ordered a laptop with money you didn't earn. You brag about tuition I'm supposedly paying. And you call me jealous? You have no idea what it's like to sacrifice, Brandon. No idea what it means to grind for every single dollar. For the first time, a flicker of discomfort crossed his face. But it was gone in a second, replaced by a smirk. That's your choice, Hailey. Nobody asked you to work so hard. You just like being a martyr. A martyr. That was how they all saw me. Not as a provider. Not as someone who had carried more than her share. Just someone too uptight to accept the way things were. My mother reached for my hand again, voice syrupy sweet. Hailey, don't raise your voice. It's your birthday. Let's not make this ugly. I yanked my hand away. It's already ugly. Do you not hear him? He doesn't see me as a sister. He sees me as a bank account. Brandon leaned forward, elbows on the table, his grin fading into something sharper. If you really loved this family, you'd do it. You'd pay. That's what loyalty looks like. The air in the room turned heavy, suffocating. They weren't just asking me to help. They were demanding proof of loyalty, equating love with money. My father glaring, my mother pleading, my brother mocking. 3 against 1, all circling like wolves at the table set with roast and china. And yet, beneath the fear and the rage, something steadied in me. I looked at Brandon, at his smug face, and I felt clarity slice through the noise. I'm not your tuition fairy, I said, my voice calm but razor sharp. And I never will be. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's knife clattered against the plate. My mother's lips parted in shock. Brandon's smirk faltered, just for a moment. And in that crack of silence, I realized something powerful. They needed me far more than I needed them. The silence at the table felt like a living thing, pressing against my skin. My words still hung in the air. I'm not your tuition fairy, and I never will be. For once, Brandon had no quick comeback. My mother's eyes glistened with tears that looked more rehearsed than real. And my father, My father finally set down his fork. Richard Parker leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. His eyes were sharp, cold, the kind that could cut through bone. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "You're making a mistake, Hailey." I kept my gaze steady, though my heart pounded in my ears. "Number, the mistake was you selling my car without permission." He ignored that, like he always ignored anything that didn't fit his narrative. "Your brother's future depends on you. Family supports family. That's the way it's always been, and it's the way it will stay." I leaned forward, my voice low. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't treat one child like a workhorse and the other like royalty. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but my father didn't flinch. He picked up his water glass, knuckles whitening around it, and took a slow sip before setting it down. Then he delivered the words that changed everything. "If you won't pay for your brother's tuition, then you don't belong under this roof. Pay or move out." The room went still. My mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand as if she hadn't seen this coming. Brandon's eyes flicked between us, wide with surprise, but also laced with amusement. He liked the drama as long as it didn't touch him. I felt the words slam into me, but instead of breaking me, they lit a fire in my chest. For years, I had handed over rent checks, groceries, utility money, everything they demanded, just to keep the fragile peace. And here he was, pretending as if I'd lived here for free. My voice shook, but not with fear, with rage. "Move out? Are you serious? I've been paying you rent since I was 18. I covered bills, groceries, everything Brandon never had to touch. And you still have the audacity to tell me I don't belong here?" My father slammed his palm on the table, the plates rattling. "Don't twist this, Hailey. You've had it easy compared to the real world. $400 a month? That's nothing. You should be grateful we allowed you to stay at all." My chest tightened. "Allowed me? I'm your daughter, not a tenant. I don't owe you gratitude for existing in my own home." He stood now, towering over the table, his face flushed with anger. "Ungrateful. That's what you are. After everything we've given you, this is how you repay us? By refusing to support your family? By spitting in our faces?" I rose too, my chair scraping against the floor. "Given me? You took from me. You took my scholarship. You took Grandma's necklace. And now you've taken my car. Don't you dare stand there and tell me I'm ungrateful." My mother rushed in, voice trembling. "Hailey, please, lower your voice. The neighbors will hear. Can't we talk about this calmly?" I laughed bitterly. "Calm? You've spent my entire life telling me to be calm while you strip everything away. I'm done being calm." Brandon finally spoke, his voice uncertain. "Dad, maybe—" "Quiet," my father snapped, silencing even his golden child. Then he turned back to me, eyes blazing. "You have a choice, Hailey. Either you pay for Brandon's tuition or you pack your things and get out. And if you walk out that door, don't think you can come crawling back when life chews you up. Because once you're out for good." The ultimatum dropped like a gavel, final and absolute. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Part of me wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice. Another part wanted to collapse into tears. But beneath it all, beneath the fear and the fury, a strange calm settled over me. Because in his ultimatum, my father had unknowingly given me the freedom I'd been fighting for all along. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, "Then I guess I'm out." The table erupted. My mother crying, Brandon sputtering, my father roaring about betrayal and disobedience. But I didn't hear them. I was already imagining the door closing behind me, already tasting the air outside that stifling house. For the first time in my life, I felt something close to power. The rest of dinner blurred into background noise. My father's voice rose and fell. My mother sniffled into her napkin, and Brandon shoveled down dessert like nothing had changed. But for me, the decision had already been made. I wasn't staying another night in this house as their prisoner. When I finally pushed away from the table, the scrape of the chair echoed like a gunshot. "I'll pack tonight," I said flatly, my voice steady though my hands trembled at my sides. "You don't have to worry about me being under this roof anymore." My father scoffed, waving me off like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You'll come to your senses. You always do." But he didn't know. Something inside me had snapped, and once it broke, there was no piecing it back together. Upstairs in my room, I pulled out the old suitcase from the closet. The zipper was stiff, the handle frayed, but it was big enough to carry what little was truly mine. I folded scrubs, jeans, a couple of worn t-shirts. I stuffed my nursing textbooks into the bag even though they weighed a ton. I couldn't leave behind the proof of everything I'd fought for. Every item I packed felt like a piece of armor. Yet every item I left behind, a necklace long gone to my mother, childhood keepsakes buried somewhere in the attic, felt like another reminder of how much they had taken. Halfway through, I had to sit on the edge of the bed, my chest tightening. Fear crept in like a shadow. Where would I go? I had some savings, but not much. Rent in the city was brutal. My car was gone, sold out from under me. All I had was a bus schedule and a hospital badge. For a second, the weight of it threatened to crush me. I thought of the years I'd endured here, the nights of biting my tongue to keep the peace, the exhaustion of handing over rent checks just to be called ungrateful anyway. Leaving meant no safety net. No family dinners, no home-cooked meals, no roof that I could pretend was mine. But then I remembered my father's ultimatum, his voice dripping with disdain. "Pay or move out. Once you're out for good." I whispered into the empty room. Good. Dragging my suitcase down the stairs, every bump against the steps echoed louder than my heartbeat. My mother was waiting at the bottom, her face streaked with tears that seemed conveniently timed. She reached for me, clutching my arm. "Hailey, don't do this. You'll break your father's heart. Families fight, but they forgive. Don't throw everything away over money." I yanked my arm free. "This isn't about money, Mom. It's about control, and I'm done being controlled." Her lips trembled. "Where will you go? What will people think when they hear you left?" There it was. Her real fear. Not me, not my safety, just appearances. I shook my head, grabbed the handle of my suitcase, and walked past her. Brandon's voice followed me from the living room, smug and careless. "Good luck out there, tuition fairy. Don't come crawling back when you realize you can't make it." I didn't answer. I didn't look back. The night air hit me like freedom and fear all at once. The street was quiet, the sky heavy with stars I hadn't noticed in years. I stood there for a moment, suitcase at my side, my breath visible in the cool air. For the first time, I had no safety net. But also for the first time, I was untethered from their chains. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and texted the only person I trusted. "Amelia, are you still awake?" Within minutes, she replied. "Always. What's wrong?" I stared at the blinking cursor before typing the truth. "I left home. I have nowhere to go." Her response came instantly. "Come over. Couch is yours. You're not alone." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and heavy. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time that day, someone's words held love without conditions. I gripped the handle of my suitcase tighter, took a deep breath, and stepped into the night. I didn't know where this road would lead, but I knew one thing. I would never again let them decide my worth. And as I walked toward the bus stop, the lights of the house fading behind me, I realized something that made my heart race with both fear and exhilaration. This wasn't just me leaving home. This was me leaving the role they had written for me. And I was finally ready to write my own. Amelia's apartment was small, barely 2 rooms stacked above a noisy laundromat, but to me it felt like sanctuary. When she opened the door and pulled me into a hug, I almost collapsed against her shoulder. She didn't ask questions right away. She just put the kettle on, cleared space on the couch, and handed me a blanket like it was the most natural thing in the world. Only once I was sitting down, my suitcase at my feet like a loyal dog, did she finally ask, "What happened?" I couldn't even find the words at first. How do you sum up years of exploitation, favoritism, and theft in a single answer? So I gave her pieces. The car sold out from under me, the tuition demand, the ultimatum at dinner. Her eyes widened, but she never interrupted, never doubted. She just listened. And when I was done, when the silence between us grew heavy, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You don't owe them your life, Hailey. Not anymore. The words broke me. For years, I'd been told I owed everything. Rent, bills, loyalty, obedience. Even my existence was a debt to be repaid. And here was Amelia, reminding me that debt didn't actually exist. At least not in the way my parents had written it. That first night on her couch, I barely slept. My mind spun with numbers. My savings account balance, the cost of rent, bus fare, groceries. Without my car, without the thin security of a roof I'd technically been paying for, the world felt terrifyingly big. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my chest tight with both fear and a strange, stubborn excitement. The next day, Amelia insisted I take the spare key and stay as long as I needed. "It's not much, but it's yours," she said, pointing at the couch piled high with throw pillows. I smiled weakly, but inside I knew I couldn't stay forever. I had to stand on my own, even if that meant starting with nothing. I spent the next week scouring rental listings between shifts at the hospital. Every ad felt like a reminder of how little I had. Studios the size of closets demanded half my monthly paycheck. Apartments in safer neighborhoods asked for deposits I couldn't dream of affording. Each rejection, each slammed door pressed down harder on my chest. But every night I came back to Amelia's. She would slide over takeout containers, tell me stories from her own chaotic family, and remind me with her laughter that there was still life outside the Parker household. For the first time, I understood what people meant when they said you could build your own family. Finally, after 2 weeks of searching, I found it. A basement studio in an old building with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. The landlord didn't care about spotless credit or a perfect background, just cash up front. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I remember the day I moved in. 2 suitcases, a box of kitchen basics Amelia insisted I take, and a mattress from a secondhand store. When I closed the door behind me, the silence was deafening. No father shouting orders, no mother guilt-tripping me, no brother mocking me, just me. And yet, as I set my things down, a wave of fear washed over me. The room was bare, the walls dingy, the air damp. I had no furniture beyond the mattress, no car to get me around, no plan beyond working as many shifts as I could grab. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no parachute. That night, curled up under a blanket on the floor, I cried harder than I had in years. The kind of cry that comes from exhaustion and grief colliding. Grief for the family I had lost, exhaustion from carrying them on my back for so long. But beneath the tears, something else flickered. Relief. For the first time, no one could barge into my room. No one could tell me I owed them more. I whispered into the darkness, "This is mine. Even if it's nothing, it's mine." The next morning, I woke to sunlight filtering through grimy blinds. My back ached from the mattress on the floor. My stomach grumbled from skipping dinner, but when I looked around at that tiny studio, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Because for the first time, the ground beneath my feet didn't belong to Richard Parker. It belonged to me. The first week in my studio apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I told myself I needed the silence, that it was better than the constant chaos of the Parker house. But silence has a way of amplifying everything you try to ignore. My phone became the weapon they used against me. The first call came from my mother. Her voice was thick with tears before I even said hello. "Hailey, please, you don't understand what you're doing to us. Your father hasn't slept since you left. He's sick with worry. People are asking questions, Hailey. What am I supposed to tell them? That our daughter abandoned us over money?" I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. "Mom, you didn't just take money. You took my car. You forged my name. You threatened me." She sniffled loudly. "Don't twist it, sweetheart. Families fight, but families forgive. Come home. We'll forget all this happened. Just do the right thing for Brandon and everything will go back to normal." Normal. That word cut deeper than her crying. Normal meant servitude. Normal meant being their ATM until the day I collapsed. I hung up before my voice cracked, before I said something I couldn't take back. But the calls didn't stop. Every day. Sometimes 3 or 4 times. My father's voice thundered through the speaker one night, cold and sharp. "You're disgracing this family. Do you think people won't find out what you've done? Do you think you can just walk away?" I wanted to laugh at the hypocrisy. What I've done? They had stolen from me. But in Richard Parker's mind, the narrative had already been rewritten. I wasn't the victim. I was the traitor. Then came the texts, screenshots of group chats I hadn't asked to see. Aunts and uncles whispering about me, cousins chiming in with judgment. She always thought she was better than us. No wonder she ended up alone. Poor Brandon having such a selfish sister. Each word sliced deeper than I wanted to admit. I told myself they didn't matter, that these relatives never lifted a finger for me anyway. But reading those messages, I felt the isolation wrapping tighter. And then came the worst blow. Brandon. One evening after a late shift, Amelia shoved her phone in my hands. "Hailey, you should see this." It was Brandon's social media, a long post paired with a photo of him holding his new laptop, smiling wide. The caption made my stomach churn. "Headed to college thanks to sacrifices at home. Some people don't understand loyalty, but real family does. Grateful for parents who always believed in me, even when others turned their backs." The comments were full of sympathy and praise. Classmates wishing him luck, neighbors talking about how proud Richard and Elaine must be. And sprinkled among them were digs aimed at me, thinly veiled but unmistakable. Every family has one who thinks they're too good. Sad when someone forgets where they came from. I slammed the phone down, my chest burning. He's painting me as the villain. He's making it sound like I abandoned him, like I refused to help out of spite. Amelia put a hand on my shoulder. Because that's the only story they know how to tell. They make themselves saints, and you the sinner. I wanted to scream, to shout my truth into the void, to plaster my receipts, my pay stubs, the forged paperwork across every screen in town. But part of me was paralyzed. What if no one believed me? What if airing it all out only dragged me deeper into their web? That night, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from my father. His tone was calm this time, almost eerily so. "You're not one of us anymore, Hailey. Don't bother coming back. You've made your choice." I sat in the darkness of my studio, the words echoing like a sentence being passed down. Not one of us anymore. For years, I had bent over backward trying to be exactly that. One of them. I had sacrificed every ounce of independence, every dollar I could spare, just to be accepted. And now, because I said no once, I was cast out like a stranger. The tears came hard and fast, my body shaking as I curled up on the mattress. But beneath the grief, a seed of something else stirred. Defiance. If I wasn't one of them anymore, then maybe, just maybe, I was finally free to be myself. Still, the pressure didn't vanish. The phone calls, the posts, the whispers from extended family, they were relentless. It felt like standing in the middle of a storm with every gust trying to push me back toward that house. But each attack only sharpened my resolve. They wanted me silent. They wanted me obedient. They wanted me erased unless I played the role of provider. Instead, I was beginning to see another path. One that terrified me but also thrilled me. If they wanted war, I would give them one. After days of unanswered calls, voicemails dripping with manipulation, and Brandon's smug posts swirling around social media, I was close to breaking. My studio apartment felt less like freedom and more like a bunker where I hid from the noise. The walls were bare, the air damp, and some nights I wondered if my father was right. If I really had doomed myself by walking away. But then Amelia knocked on my door. She didn't wait for an invitation. She let herself in with the spare key and dropped a paper bag onto the counter. "You're not starving on my watch," she said firmly. Inside were takeout containers, enough to last me 3 meals. I laughed weakly, though the sound cracked. "You don't have to babysit me, Amelia." She leveled me with a look. "Maybe not, but I want to. You've been carrying everyone else for years, Hailey. It's about time someone carried you." That night, we ate noodles out of plastic boxes on the floor, talking about anything but my family. We laughed about patients who called Amelia Doc by mistake, about the cafeteria coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, about the ridiculous soap operas she binged on weekends. For the first time in weeks, I laughed without guilt pressing down on my chest. The next evening, 2 other nurses from the hospital dropped by with a small cake. They lit a candle and sang a belated happy birthday, their voices off-key but full of warmth. I tried to wave them off, embarrassed, but Amelia nudged me toward the cake. "Blow it out, Hailey. No one here is going to steal this from you." Tears welled in my eyes as I closed them and made a wish. Not for money, not for success, but simply for the strength to keep going. When I blew out the candle, the room erupted in cheers, louder than any birthday I'd ever had in that Parker household. The days that followed weren't easy. My mattress was still on the floor, the faucet still leaked, and I still took the bus to work clutching a secondhand tote bag. But every night, there was a knock at the door, a text from Amelia, or a coworker dropping by with leftovers. Slowly, the emptiness of my studio filled with life. A potted plant appeared on my windowsill, courtesy of Amelia. A thrift store lamp showed up from another nurse who said she didn't need it anymore. Each gift, small as it was, felt like proof that I wasn't as alone as my parents wanted me to believe. One evening, as we sat in my tiny apartment with pizza boxes spread across the floor, Amelia raised her glass of soda and said, "To Hailey, for finally choosing herself." Everyone clinked cups, and I felt my throat tighten. No one had ever toasted to me before. No one had ever celebrated my choice to stand on my own. I realized then that family didn't have to mean blood. Family could be the people who showed up with takeout when you hadn't eaten, who brought plants to brighten your window, who sang happy birthday even if it was weeks late. Family could be chosen. That night, lying on my mattress, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile hope that maybe my father would soften, or my mother would defend me, or Brandon would finally see my worth. That kind of hope had been killing me slowly, drop by drop. No, this was different. This was the hope that came from building something new, from realizing I didn't need their approval to exist. I whispered into the darkness, "I'm not alone." And for the first time, I believed it. Life in my tiny studio was starting to settle into a rhythm. Work, bus rides, late-night dinners with Amelia, then back to my mattress on the floor. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt like I was breathing air that hadn't been filtered through my father's control. But then a letter arrived. It was from the DMV, a bland white envelope with my name printed neatly across the front. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was just another notice about registration renewal. But when I opened it, the words stopped me cold. Final notice of transfer. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling. According to the letter, my vehicle, my Corolla, had been transferred and registered under 2 owners, Richard Parker and Hailey Parker. My father's name was listed right next to mine, as if he'd been there all along. The world tilted. My knees nearly buckled as I sank into the rickety chair by the counter. I never put his name on those papers. That car had been mine, paid in full with money I earned. How had this happened? And then it hit me. The morning he shoved papers into my hands on my way to a double shift. "Just registration renewal," he'd said, his tone impatient, almost annoyed. I'd been half awake, rushing, and I'd signed without reading. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might throw up. He hadn't been renewing anything. He'd been stealing my autonomy, my independence, with the stroke of a pen. I pulled out the documents I'd kept in a folder since buying the car. My signature was there, but right above it, bold and clear, was his name added as co-owner. His handwriting, his smug, calculated handwriting, forged onto what should have been mine alone. Tears blurred my vision, hot and relentless. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about every single time I'd trusted him, every time I'd let him convince me he knew best. He hadn't just taken my car. He'd taken my faith in my own judgment. I slammed the papers down, my hands shaking with fury. He forged this. He planned this from the start. I paced the room, my thoughts spinning. If he could forge my signature once, how many other times had he done it? How many papers had I signed under pressure, half aware, trusting his word? The rage boiled over. I wanted to storm back into that house, shove the papers in his face, scream until the neighbors came running. But a part of me knew yelling wouldn't fix this. He'd just twist it, gaslight me, make me believe it was my fault for not reading carefully. He'd done it before. Number this time, I needed something stronger, something undeniable. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of every page, every signature. I made copies at the hospital the next day, slipping them into an envelope I labeled in bold letters, "Evidence." For once, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. That night, lying on my mattress, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with both fury and clarity. My father had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He'd turned his daughter into a mark, a victim of fraud. And for the first time, instead of feeling powerless, I felt something else. Resolve. He thought he could bury me under paperwork, under guilt and manipulation. But he didn't count on the fact that I'd spent years documenting every bill, every payment, every cent I'd handed over. I had receipts. I had memory. And now I had proof of his forgery. As I drifted into a restless sleep, clutching the folder against my chest, one thought pulsed louder than my heartbeat. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was legal, and I was done playing by his rules. The next morning, I walked into work with the folder clutched under my arm, my stomach twisted into knots. I could handle 12-hour shifts, the cries of sick children, even the exhaustion that came with being short-staffed. But this legal mess, this betrayal carved into official documents, it was bigger than me. During my lunch break, Amelia noticed me staring blankly at my sandwich. "You look like you're about to be sick," she said gently. I slid the folder toward her across the table. "Because I think my father committed fraud, and I don't even know where to start." She flipped through the papers, her brow furrowing. "Hailey, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is serious. You need a lawyer." The word made my chest tighten. A lawyer. It sounded expensive, intimidating, like something reserved for people with more money and less chaos than me. "I can't afford one," I whispered. Amelia shook her head firmly. "There's a guy I know, Daniel Whitman. He's a patient's dad. Specializes in financial disputes, pro bono sometimes if the case is strong enough. I'll call him." That evening, I found myself sitting in a cramped office downtown. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the kind of place where lives got untangled one document at a time. When Daniel Whitman walked in, he wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, sleeves rolled up, no-nonsense glasses perched on his nose. He had the calm energy of someone who had seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Hailey," he said, extending his hand. "Amelia told me you've had a rough go. Why don't you tell me everything?" For the next hour, I did. I told him about the rent I'd paid since I was 18, the scholarship money my parents had pocketed, the necklace my grandmother left me that disappeared onto my mother's neck. I told him about the car, the forged papers, the ultimatum at dinner. By the time I finished, my throat was raw, and my hands were clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Daniel listened without interrupting, jotting notes occasionally, his expression unreadable. When I finally stopped, the silence stretched for a moment. Then he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Hailey, I'll be blunt. What your father did with those car papers is fraud. Adding himself to the title without your knowledge, especially if he tricked you into signing something under false pretenses, is illegal. If he sold the car after that, we're talking potential civil liability. Maybe even criminal, depending on how far it goes." The words hit me like a lifeline. Fraud. Liability. Illegal. They weren't just my feelings anymore. They were facts, backed by law. My voice trembled. "So, I'm not crazy? I didn't imagine all this?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "Number. And you're not alone anymore. But I need everything. Every receipt, every message, every scrap of paper that proves your financial contributions. If you've got text messages about them demanding money, that's evidence too. The more you have, the stronger your case." For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt my shoulders lighten. This wasn't just me screaming into the void anymore. Someone believed me. Someone with power. Daniel slid me a card. "I'll take this case pro bono for now. I want you to understand, though, family cases are messy. They'll fight back, probably try to smear you. But if we do this right, you can recover damages, maybe even get restitution for that car. Are you ready for that fight?" I thought of my father's voice on the phone, sneering, "You're not one of us anymore." I thought of my mother's tears, Brandon's smug grin, the years of being their ATM. I nodded, my jaw set. "I've been fighting alone my whole life. I'm ready to fight with the truth on my side." Daniel smiled faintly, a spark of approval in his eyes. "Good. Then let's start building your case." As I left his office, the city lights glinting off rain-slick sidewalks, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, yes. But alongside it was something stronger. Resolve. For the first time, I wasn't running from my family's betrayal. I was running toward justice. Daniel's words echoed in my head all the way home. Every receipt, every message, every scrap of paper. For years, I thought of myself as obsessive for keeping boxes of old bills, envelopes stuffed with pay stubs, and notebooks filled with scribbled payment logs. My father mocked me for it more than once. "You keep records like an accountant," he sneered. "Who are you trying to impress?" Now I finally understood. I wasn't obsessive. I was prepared. That night, I pulled the battered shoebox from under my mattress and dumped its contents onto the floor of my studio. Receipts spilled everywhere. Grocery slips, utility bills, even faded notes with my father's handwriting. "Hailey, rent due Friday." I spread them out in piles, my hands shaking as I sorted through years of proof. Rent payments from when I was 18, even though most kids my age lived at home for free. Grocery receipts with totals circled, showing how often I covered family dinners. Gas station slips from driving Brandon to practices across town, miles I never got back. Each slip of paper was like a scar, physical evidence of the life they pretended didn't exist. Then came the digital trail. I pulled up my old phone, scrolling through texts I hadn't looked at in years. There it was, message after message from my father. "Send $200 for bills. Your share of electric is late. Need $500 for Brandon's trip, family comes first." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. All those nights I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling guilty, feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And here was proof that I had been carrying them all along. Even my mother's voicemails played like daggers, her calm tone layered with guilt. "Sweetheart, can you pick up the mortgage this month? Your father's stressed. It would mean so much." I copied everyone, saving the audio files like precious jewels. The most damning evidence, though, came from the car. Digging through my folder again, I found the inspection notice from the morning my father shoved those papers at me. The dates didn't line up. The DMV letter proved he added his name months later, long after the inspection. That forged co-ownership wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I documented everything, labeling folders, scanning files at the hospital when no one was looking. Daniel had said, "Build me a fortress of evidence," and I took him at his word. Every night after my shifts, I sat cross-legged on the floor, my studio buried under papers. It felt like piecing together a puzzle of my own life, one I'd been too tired to see clearly before. And as the piles grew, so did my fury. They hadn't just stolen my car. They had been stealing from me for years, dollar by dollar, lie by lie. One night, Amelia dropped by with Chinese takeout and froze when she saw the chaos on the floor. "Looks like a crime scene," she joked lightly. I met her eyes, my voice steady. "It is." She helped me sort through the mess, handing me highlighters and sticky notes. Together, we marked the worst examples: the scholarship deposit that never hit my account, the months I covered utilities while Brandon bragged about his allowance, the text from my dad demanding money for family expenses the same week he bought my brother a new phone. By the time we were done, the floor was covered in neon tabs and labeled stacks. Amelia leaned back against the wall, shaking her head. "Hailey, this is bigger than I realized. You weren't just supporting them. You were their entire financial backbone." Her words settled over me like truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't selfish for leaving. I wasn't cruel for saying no. I had been exploited, plain and simple. The next morning, I walked into Daniel's office with a duffel bag full of documents. He raised his eyebrows as I unzipped it and started unloading the evidence onto his desk. "Well," he said with a faint smile, "either you're the most organized client I've ever had, or your father is in more trouble than he knows." I sat down, my voice steady. "Both." Daniel flipped through the stacks, nodding as he went. "This isn't just a case about a car anymore. This is years of financial exploitation. The paper trail is clear, and it paints a very ugly picture for your parents. If they try to smear you, these documents will bury them." For the first time in my life, the weight shifted. For years, I had been crushed under the burden of proof. Always the one accused, always the one doubted. But now, the proof was mine. And it was powerful. As I left his office, my bag lighter but my spirit heavier with determination, one thought pulsed in my mind. They wanted me silenced. Instead, I had found my voice. And soon, the world would hear it. Daniel warned me. "The minute they know you're fighting back, they'll come after you harder. Expect anger. Expect guilt. Expect lies. Don't flinch." I thought I was ready. I thought nothing they did could shock me anymore. I was wrong. It started with another voicemail from my father. His voice was low, dangerous. "You think you're clever, Hailey? Running to a lawyer? You're wasting your time." No judge is going to side with an ungrateful daughter who lived off her parents' generosity. You want to fight? Fine. But once this gets public, don't expect to have a family left when it's over. My hand shook as I played it again, then again, making sure I'd heard every word. The threat wasn't even subtle. It was a promise. That night, I called him back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't calling to apologize or explain. I was calling to confront. He answered on the first ring. So the prodigal daughter finally decides to speak. I know about the forgery, I said, my voice sharp. I have the papers, Dad. You tricked me into signing, and I have proof. The DMV has proof. This isn't just family business anymore, it's fraud. There was a pause. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd crack. Admit it. Beg me to keep it private. Instead, he laughed. A harsh, humorless laugh. You think anyone cares? You think you'll survive dragging your own father into court? Everyone will see you for what you are. A bitter, selfish girl who turned on her family. The words stung, but this time I had armor. I have receipts. I have texts. I have years of proof that I carried this family while you called me ungrateful. If you want this to go public, Dad, I'll make sure every detail is heard. The laughter died. When he spoke again, his voice was sharper, the calm veneer cracking. You wouldn't dare. I already did. I lied smoothly. My lawyer has everything. Even if I disappeared tomorrow, the case moves forward. The silence on the other end stretched long enough to make my chest tighten. Then came the slam of a phone hanging up. I exhaled shakily, my whole body trembling. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Power. For the first time, I had made him retreat. The next day, it was my mother's turn. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, standing in the hallway with a Tupperware of pot roast like peace could be packaged and reheated. Hailey, sweetheart, she began, her voice syrupy. Why are you doing this to us? To your father? He's heartbroken. Brandon is devastated. You're tearing this family apart. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. No, Mom. Dad tore this family apart when he forged my signature. You watched him do it. Her eyes flickered just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. You don't understand the pressure he's under. We've always done everything for you. Can't you forgive one mistake? One mistake? My laugh came out sharp, bitter. This wasn't one mistake. This was years of theft. My scholarship, my money, my car. You call that one mistake? Her eyes filled with tears, and she clutched the Tupperware closer to her chest. If you go through with this, people will know. They'll talk. Do you really want to humiliate your father? Do you want Brandon to start college with this cloud hanging over him? The manipulation was almost impressive, but this time I didn't bend. If you're worried about humiliation, Mom, maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from me. I'm not covering for you anymore. Her tears vanished as quickly as they'd come. She set the Tupperware down hard on the floor, her face twisting into something colder than I'd ever seen. Then you're no daughter of mine. The words sliced deep, but instead of bleeding, I felt steel harden inside me. Good, I whispered. And I shut the door in her face. Later that night, Amelia found me sitting on the floor, staring at the closed door. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady when I said, They're scared, Amelia. For the first time, they're actually scared. She smiled softly, handing me a mug of tea. That's because you finally stopped playing by their rules. The hearing room wasn't a grand courtroom with marble floors and oak benches. It was smaller, tucked inside a government building, but to me it felt just as heavy. My hands shook as I smoothed my skirt, the folder of evidence resting on my lap. Daniel sat beside me, calm as ever, his glasses sliding down his nose as he skimmed his notes one last time. Across the table sat my family. Richard leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, arms folded across his chest, a smirk tugging at his mouth. Elaine dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, already playing the part of the long-suffering mother. Brandon slouched beside them, phone in hand, not even pretending to take this seriously. When the officer leading the mediation announced, "Let's begin," my pulse roared in my ears. Daniel spoke first. His voice was firm, steady. We're here because my client, Hailey Parker, has been the victim of financial fraud and exploitation by her family. Specifically, her father forged her signature to add himself to her car title, then sold the vehicle without her consent. We have documentation to prove it. Richard scoffed loudly. Forged? That's ridiculous. She signed the papers herself. She just didn't bother reading. Daniel adjusted his glasses. Interesting you say that, because the DMV records show the co-ownership was added months after the inspection date. Here. He slid the official letter across the table. This is proof the signature was altered. For the first time, Richard's smirk faltered. His eyes darted to the paper, then back up, his jaw tightening. I leaned forward, my voice steady, though my hands trembled under the table. You told me it was just registration renewal. You shoved it at me on my way to work. You lied. Elaine gasped softly, pressing a hand to her chest. Hailey, sweetheart, you're twisting things. Your father was only trying to make sure the paperwork was in order. We've always taken care of you. Daniel didn't miss a beat. Taken care of? Let's look at the financial records. He opened the thick binder we'd spent weeks compiling. Page after page of receipts, bank transfers, text messages. He laid them out like cards in a game, each one heavier than the last. Here, he said, pointing to a stack of rent receipts. Hailey paying $400 a month since she was 18. That's not care. That's exploitation. Here, text messages demanding money for utilities, for groceries, even for Brandon's extracurriculars. And here, he tapped another page. Scholarship funds that mysteriously never reached her account. The room was silent except for the shuffle of paper. Elaine's tears dried instantly. Brandon finally looked up from his phone, his face pale. Richard's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. The officer leaned over the documents, brows furrowed. This is substantial. Richard exploded. This is nonsense. Families share responsibilities. She lived under my roof. She ate my food. She owed us. I felt the words like knives, but this time I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Dad. I owed you nothing. You weren't providing. You were taking. From the moment I could work, you made me your safety net. And when I finally said no, you stole the one thing that was mine. For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw it. The flicker of fear in his eyes. The realization that he couldn't twist this into obedience anymore. The officer cleared his throat. Mr. Parker, based on this evidence, it appears your daughter has a legitimate claim. The forged signature alone could be grounds for legal action. Elaine reached for my hand across the table, her voice trembling. Hailey, please don't do this. You'll ruin your father's reputation. Brandon's future. We're family. I pulled my hand back, my voice steady. Family doesn't ruin your life, and call it love. Brandon finally spoke, his voice sharp. So what? You're going to sue us? Over a car? You're pathetic. Daniel leaned in, his tone calm but cutting. This isn't about a car anymore, Brandon. This is about years of financial abuse. And if this goes to court, the damages will add up to far more than tuition money. You should all think very carefully about how you proceed. The room fell into silence. For once, my father had no comeback. My mother's face crumpled, not with guilt, but with fear. Brandon looked like he'd been slapped, his arrogance cracked wide open. And me? For the first time, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't begging. I wasn't the powerless daughter they could bully into silence. I was standing on the side of truth. And the truth was finally louder than their lies. When I walked out of that hearing room, the sun felt different. Brighter somehow. Warmer against my skin. For years, every step I took had been under the shadow of Richard Parker's authority. Under Elaine's manipulative tears, under Brandon's smug entitlement. But now the shadow is behind me. Daniel clapped me gently on the shoulder as we stepped onto the sidewalk. You did good in there. Strong. You spoke the truth and they couldn't hide from it. I swallowed hard, emotion tightening my throat. Do you think they'll actually stop? He adjusted his glasses. They'll have no choice. Legally, they're cornered, and even if they try to fight, you've got the receipts to bury them. This is your turning point, Hailey. Don't waste it by looking back. Looking back. That was all I'd ever done. I thought about every birthday forgotten, every rent check shoved across the table, every night lying awake wondering why I wasn't enough for them. But Daniel was right. That chapter was closed. That night, Amelia and a few friends from the hospital showed up at my tiny studio with bags of groceries, paper lanterns, and a bottle of cheap champagne. My apartment had never looked so alive. The leaky faucet still dripped, the mattress still sat on the floor, but the room glowed with laughter, with warmth, with something I hadn't felt in years. belonging. Amelia raised her glass high. To Hailey, for proving that family doesn't get to steal your soul, no matter how hard they try. The others clinked their glasses, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not from sadness, but from something sweeter. Gratitude. Relief. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, my voice trembling but strong. For years, I thought family was who shared your blood. That no matter how badly they treated you, you had to stay because leaving meant betrayal. But tonight, I know better. Family isn't about blood. Family is about who stands beside you when you have nothing left. And tonight, I'm not alone. The room erupted in cheers and someone pulled me into a hug, then another. For the first time, I wasn't the ATM, the scapegoat, the afterthought. I was simply Hailey, and that was enough. Later, when the crowd thinned and the laughter faded, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Richard Parker was stewing in silence, his lies cracked open for the world to see. Elaine was probably clutching her pearls, whispering to relatives about how I had destroyed the family. Brandon was back on his phone, scrambling to rebuild the image he thought would carry him through life. But none of that mattered anymore. They weren't my problem. They weren't my responsibility. They weren't my family. Behind me, Amelia's voice broke my thoughts. You okay? I turned, smiling softly. Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I think I'm okay. She grinned and handed me a slice of leftover cake. Good, because tomorrow we're going to IKEA. If you're starting fresh, you at least deserve a real bed. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Light. Free. Deal. As I curled up on my mattress that night, surrounded by the faint scent of candle wax and laughter still echoing in the walls, I whispered to myself, they don't own me anymore. And for the first time, I believed it. So that's my story. A story of betrayal, of walking away from blood ties that were nothing but chains, and of finding a family in the people who truly showed up for me. If you take anything from this, let it be this. You are not obligated to stay where you are unloved, unvalued, or used. You deserve freedom. You deserve peace. If my story spoke to you, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next one. Every time you do, you help this channel grow and make sure more people hear stories like mine. This is Hidden Family Revenge Stories, where silence turns into strength and the forgotten finally get to speak. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.